I remember when Dragon Age Origins came out, playing that game, day one purchase. I love RPGs, and I'd never played anything like it. To be honest, it kind of blew my mind. It really felt like a step forward for the genre, and I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the presentation, had all the strategy I was looking for. I was in awe of that game, and to sit here now, working on the next edition of Dragon Age, it's a dream come true.
I owe my career to Dragon Age. I've grown as a person and grown as a game developer with it, and I'm so excited to finally be able to talk about Veilguard especially.
This is really the best Dragon Age game that I've ever played. I obviously carry some bias because I'm coming into it partially from the outside, but yeah, this is the best one. This is the one where we get back to our roots of character-driven storytelling, have really fun combat, and aren't making compromises.
Every game has heart and soul that goes into it. But this is something different. This is something more.
I'm John Epler. I am the creative director for Dragon Age Veilguard. Been at BioWare for coming up on 17 years this year. I hold together the story, the vision, the kind of creative intent of not just the game, but how it relates to Dragon Age as a whole, the storytelling we're doing, and all that sort of thing.
My name's Corinne Bush. I'm the game director on Dragon Age the Veilguard. I joined BioWare just shortly after Anthem had launched, and fortunately the opportunity came along to join my dream franchise, Dragon Age.
I'm Mark Dara. I am the former executive producer for the Dragon Age franchise. I was executive producer on Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, and Dragon Age Inquisition.
One of the things we wanted to make sure with Veilguard is that it's respectful and referential to previous games without feeling like you needed to have played Inquisition or DA2 or DAO to understand what's going on. So while there are references, there are moments that we have callbacks, it really is its own story, its own continuation with a different cast, with different characters. Historically, Dragon Age has always had a different cast per game, so that gives us a lot of freedom in terms of what we want to lean on in the past and what we want to really bring in that's new and forward-facing.
The thing that happened in 2023 that I love is that it blew the doors open in terms of what a storytelling RPG could be, where you had Baldur's Gate 3 and you had Zelda and you had all of these games, Starfield, come out in the same year and say, this is a storytelling RPG. They're very different from each other. You can like some of these, you can like all of these, but the genre can be bigger. We're learning on each other, we're building foundations that we can build upon. So I think there are going to be a lot of people who picked up their first RPG last year that are going to be looking to pick up something new and could really find something to love in Dragon Age the Veilguard.
Hey, Chuckles. Hope I'm not interrupting. Let's buy him some time.
Now, I want to be clear, I adore Solus. I'm a Solo Valen player, but this is not a game about Solus. So, in all things we do, trying to capture that authentic experience, we felt the title really needed to change.
Dreadwolf suggests a title focused on a specific individual, whereas Veilguard, much like Inquisition, focuses more on the team, focuses more on the group, focuses more on the party than it does on one specific person.
The absolute beating heart of this game are these authentic, diverse companions. And when we took a step back, as we always do, we always check our decisions and make sure that they still represent the game we're trying to build. It just felt like we needed a title that represented what this game was truly about.
I think it was absolutely the right choice. Names can take on a momentum. Arguably, this game has kind of, in a way, been called Dreadwolf since its earlier days. And as the game evolved, as the game figured out exactly what it was, it's very mature to step back and say, we called it something, does it really still reflect what the game is? And I think the fact that the team was willing to take that step is amazing, and I think this is absolutely the right decision.
Is Solus summoning demons on purpose? My guess is the veil is weakening, and they're slipping through the cracks. And when the veil comes down completely, then the whole world is going to look a lot like this.
One of the principles we took to when we were building the story of the Veilguard early on was we wanted the beginning of the game to feel like the final chapter of an earlier story. You know, at the end of Trespasser, Solas said he was going to end the world, tear down the veil, and so you start the Veilguard having chased Solas to the city of Minrathous in the Tevinter Empire, there to stop his ritual, there to take him down, and so you're working with Varric, you're working with other characters, Scout Harding, Nev, who is the detective. You're there to find this character, so you're chasing him, you're trying to stop this ritual that he's already said multiple times that he's going to perform before he performs it, because if he does, the veil get torn down, Fade and the world of the Waking will merge, and demons will pour out, pretty much meaning the end of life as we know it.
You know, the thing that is so amazing about Veilguard is this is the game where we finally said out loud that BioWare's greatest strength is telling stories through characters. If you go all the way back to Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2, these are games that are telling stories through characters, but there wasn't an intentionality behind that. And in this game, we're finally putting that intentionality first and foremost, putting the characters first, building the game around those character moments, around those characters, which is really the best way that BioWare knows how to tell stories.
The most interesting villains to myself, and honestly to most people, are not just straight up, I just want to end the world. To them, they are the heroes of the story, and Solas is no exception. Solas always feels that he is a tragic hero, but a hero nonetheless, so he's coming into this believing firmly that what you stopped him from doing was the right thing, that you made a mistake, but because now he's trapped, now he can't, reach out and actively affect, he needs to work with you. And that allows us to provide a lot of nuance to the relationship, because Solas sees a lot of himself in you, especially the parts of himself that he maybe doesn't like to face. So there is kind of that interesting push and pull between the two characters, Solas and the main protagonist, Rook. And you can define what that relationship means. You can continue to be suspicious and hostile towards him, or you can start to see him and find that common ground, find that connection between the two of you, and really develop a different relationship over the course of the story.
This is a good direction to take the Solas story. It allows us to hopefully give a good conclusion to all of the varied attitudes towards Solas that are going to be coming into this game. People who love Solas, people who agree with Solas, people who hate Solas, people who want to kick Solas off a building. I think that we give you the opportunity to bring that to a close, but then tell a greater story about the Veilguard and about the world as a whole.
Having worked on Inquisition, having worked on Veilguard, one of the things that we really wanted to lean into early on was Dragon Age has always been about characters, but to some degree it's almost felt like we've lucked into that. Inquisition is a story that ultimately you and the main characters you recruit at the beginning are the ones who have the biggest part to play. We wanted to tell a story this time where you literally cannot save the world without these characters. Beyond that though, we also wanted to give them their own arcs that run parallel to the main story and really give them that kind of deep storytelling that our fans really enjoy and really thrive. So these followers or these companions don't just exist by themselves, they have relationships with each other as well. They have friendships, they have rivalries, and lean into that concept. You're not just pulling together a bunch of people who will do whatever you say, you're assembling a family, and that becomes the core of what the Veilguard is all about. It's about taking this group, this found family, and saving the world side by side with them.
This is a story told through characters, but it is a story that's going somewhere. In Origins, a lot of things were done just to do them. In Veilguard, things are done towards a goal, towards a storytelling goal, towards the future. So this is a game which takes the ball that Inquisition had, puts its own spin on it, has its own characters, takes its own direction, but continues that path forward into the future.
One of the principles we wanted to get into with Dragon Age, the Veilguard, is the world exists even when you're not around. There are things, there are ancient conflicts, there are grudges, things that happen even when Rook, the protagonist, isn't participating in them, and you kind of come in media res in some of these. So the message of the Veilguard is you're not saving the world on your own. You need your companions, but you also need these factions, these other groups in the world. You help them, they help you. Now, something we wanted to avoid, because there's always the trope of, oh yeah, I would help you save the world, but I need you to go gather 200 200 wood, exactly. It's kind of a silly concept. So what we wanted to build is these factions that do want to help you, but have realistic challenges, problems in front of them. So narratively, you help them with their problems. They will help you with yours when the time comes. But beyond that, each faction has a follower as well as ancillary character we're calling agents, who exist as these face of the faction. We're not going to get too deep into those right now, but we didn't want to just say, here's the wardens, go deal with the war. We wanted to have characters within that faction who are sympathetic, who you can see and who become the face of that faction. So even if there's moments where the faction as a whole may be on the outs with you, these characters are still with you. They've still got your back. It's a core of what we've done with the storytelling in this game. We wanted to make sure all the content you did felt relevant. Everything you do has a purpose and has a tie back into the critical path. Sometimes it's more explicit than others, but there is always a sense that you're moving towards the goal of stopping the elven gods, stopping the end of the world. And it's not just, and I love Dragon Age Inquisition, but the side content, it's not just finding the ring, someone's ring, and returning to them. It's helping these people, helping these groups so they can help you when the time comes.
So when it comes to identity and iteration on the franchise, we've really moved it into a place where you have the highest of highs. It can be colorful, it can be optimistic, but also you can have the lowest of lows, where it gets gritty, it gets painful, it gets quite dark. But throughout it all, there's a sense of optimism, and it creates this delightful through line through the game, this identity that I really think is something special for the franchise now and going forward.
Should we be in more of a hurry to get out of here?
We don't want to look conspicuous. Just get out of here nice and casual. Find Nev Gallus and stop Solus.
The interesting thing about Dragon Age the Veilguard is it takes part in a world of Thedas that we've only hinted at. We've never been there before. The Grey Warden Fortress of Weishaupt, the depths of Arlathan Forest, the Ravane Coast, or even the Grand Necropolis in Navarra. These are storied locations. Let's not forget about Minrathous itself. The great thing about setting the game in these storied locations is no one has ever seen them before.
It's extremely exciting. It's honestly, when we started building out these spaces, it's just, the possibilities were endless. There's a very famous line by Dorian talking about Minrathous in particular. You go to Hlom Shrall Inquisition, and it's this big, gilded, impressive palace. The only place you've been up to this point is either Kirkwall or Ferelden, both, a little bit less impressive. And Dorian looks at this massive structure, this just absolutely enchanting castle, and says, yeah, that's cute. So finding those moments where we've referenced things and thinking to ourselves, what is the best version of this that we can present? And in the case of Minrathous, what's more spectacular than this massive gilded palace? In the case of Arlathan, what does it look like when you go to the place where the elves had their ancient empire that was run on and fueled by magic? What does the aftermath of that look like, especially when the gods are out in the world and raw magic is seeping back out from the Fade? So one of the things we wanted to get to with the team is really lean on them for their ideas. Like, what excites you about this space? What brings you, a joy and just a thrill to put into the game? And making sure that it fits with the lore. But the great thing about Dragon Age is it's always historically been a series where truth has multiple perspectives. So it just allowed us to build this cohesive space, but also this incredibly colorful, detailed version of each of these spaces we've never been to.
It really is a hub and spoke based design. Your base of operations is the lighthouse. You're going to journey out from the lighthouse into an area of the Fade known as the Crossroads, which is full of mysteries, exploration, branching paths, and you'll take Alluvians to the far corners of northern Thedas. As far as the environments themselves, some of them are more heavily mission focused, which means they're full of narrative beat after narrative beat. And this is one of the constants of our design philosophy is a curated, handcrafted experience. And by creating that sense of handcrafted, narrative-based experience, we really strongly feel it allows us to tell the best stories possible. We know what's going to happen, we know when it's going to happen, but of course it's influenced by all the decisions that you, the player, have made along the way. However, the game does really open up into some of our larger exploration areas. Now, it's not open world, but these are non-linear areas where you can open up new sections of the map, find new pathways, really leaning into solving mysteries, finding ancient treasures, and some of our apex battles. There's some truly terrifying enemies you're going to encounter when you're left to your own means to kind of explore these larger areas.
We've been in the south of Thetis, and South Thetis is Ferelden, Orlais. Both are still fairly oppressed. You know, they still have circles. Mages are viewed with suspicion, but Tevinter has always been this land where mages rule. Mages are in charge. Mages make the rules, mages run the show. So what does that look like? And as we've gone through, you know, DAO, DA2, Inquisition, magic has become more and more present. And part of that is because Solus has been slowly preparing this ritual for longer than anyone in the Dragon Age universe is really aware of, but also just going into these spaces where magic is by definition and by the lore much, much more present. It's been fun because, again, we do have rules. We want to make sure we're not violating the lore, violating things we've said before, but it's also, again, that permissiveness of, okay, what is the most interesting way to do this? What's the most interesting way to tell this story? It's also, honestly, as technology has gotten better, we've been able to show Origins DA2 on the Eclipse engine. We could talk about this fantastical magic, but the engine didn't really allow us to show it. For the first time, we're really able to let the visuals speak for themselves and not have to tell the player, trust us, it's spectacular, this magic is really cool. We can actually show you and let you drink it in because it is, again, it's a fantastical setting.
We have a rich history of lore, of world building within the IP. So existing players will be familiar with these places and very excited to go to them and explore their mysteries. But for our new players, we're not assuming that you know anything about these locations. And I would say that also extends to the characters. We've taken great care in how we introduce each and every single companion, major story figure within the game as they're introduced.
This crew needs a leader. Someone we can count on. Someone that the world can count on. But where are we gonna find her?
So for me personally, and I know for the team, it was important that you could see yourself in the game, and that always begins with the character creator. Who you want to be, who you are, or maybe just a completely different character. And that meant supporting all the options, various lineages throughout the history of Dragon Age, and also the various types of identities and people that exist out in the world. I'm really proud of what we've built there because it is a game where everyone belongs.
Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 were doing what they could with the technology that they had. Dragon Age Inquisition did a good job of using Frostbite, respected the engine, but this game has been able to execute visually to a degree that just wasn't possible in the past. Everyone moved in exactly the same way. If you put on a suit of armor and you put it on Alistair, you looked exactly the same, standing right beside each other. Now we're able to keep the character coming through in the visuals and the motion, even as you're customizing them, which just wasn't possible in the past.
It's really tough, I must say, in an RPG where you're equipping different types of armor, where you've got different lineages to create that robust experience. But it's something we absolutely wanted to support. And that comes along with a couple of new to Dragon Age features that really push the limits of what we've seen in RPG character creation before. So first of all, full body customization with pretty robust diversity in terms of body shape, body size, proportions, things of that nature. So that was a pretty big evolution for us. We've also invested tremendous effort in our strand hair technology, numerous hairstyles, because we know how much our fans care about that. I'm one of them as well. The first thing I always look for is show me the hairstyles. But the range of hairstyles really matters too. It's not just about quantity. It's making sure that we have diverse representation for all types of players. This is defining how you want to enter the world. So we took a step back and said, how are we going to incorporate things like your background in a meaningful way? How are we going to incorporate things like how you want to experience the gameplay of the game? And all of those are very important factors. I'm particularly proud of integrating, we call it playstyle, but is effectively difficulty into the character creation process. So you can select a number of preset experiences that your character will adopt and step into the game with, but you can also customize that playstyle. So if you're like me and you're terrible at parrying, you can ease that up a little bit. Some of the locations that we'll be visiting are bustling cityscapes. We're going to go right to the heart of the Tevinter Empire. We're also going to go to a city in Antiva called Traduzido. These have a dense populace, And we knew we needed to have the tools to support a wide range of NPCs. You're not going to find NPCs that look alike in this game. Every NPC is crafted using the same tools that we're giving to our players, with the exception of some of our custom sculpted characters like the companions. So when you walk up to that market vendor in Minrathous, you can make that character. When you see the guards patrolling the street, you can make that character too. I think it's so interesting, not only as a developer to be able to use player-facing tools and technology, but then as a player to be inspired by the population around you and be able to go replicate that inside of the character creator.
Where's Nevgalis? Wasn't she at the meeting point?
The Venatori got to her first. They grabbed her before we arrived and paid off the bar owner to keep it quiet.
I'm not surprised our detective did something to piss off a cult of murderous blood mages, but their timing stinks.
These are the most fully realized, complex companions we've ever crafted, and I do believe they are our best. They're complicated, they have complicated problems, and what's interesting, as much as I adore the companions and the journeys I've been on with them in past Dragon Age titles, previously it feels like the companions are going on an adventure with me, the main character, whether it's the hero Ferelden or Hawk, you name it. But in Dragon Age the Veilguard, in many ways, the companions are so fleshed out that it feels as though I'm going on a journey with them. I'm exploring how they think and feel. I'm helping them through their problems. We're working through their unique character arcs. They feel like my dear friends, and I absolutely adore them. So outside of combat, what that means is they're going to have their own concerns, fears, distractions, and indeed, even their own sanctuaries, their own personal spaces. In our, I guess you could call it our base of operations this time, our player hub, the lighthouse, each of the companions has their own room. And what I love about it is it becomes a reflection of who they are. The more time you spend with them, as the game develops, as you work through their arc, their room and their personalities will evolve and flourish and become more complete as they trust you more and you understand them better. What's interesting, the companions also develop romantically. I'm not just talking about with the character, the main character Rook, I'm talking about with each other. There are moments in the game where two of our companions fell in love with each other, and I had to make some pretty challenging choices as it related to the quest we were on. And it broke my heart. It absolutely did. So I would say as you're adventuring with them and you're returning to the lighthouse and getting to know them, all of these decisions and conversations and things you learn about them, it endears them to you in a way that I honestly haven't experienced before. And sometimes that fills me with joy, and sometimes it breaks my heart.
All right, I'll take it from here.
Are you sure?
Positive. You three just keep the demons off me while I talk to him.
Varric, Solus isn't gonna stop just because an old friend asks nicely.
Solus needs someone to sell him another option, to help him justify changing his mind.
Come on, Varric. We didn't come all this way just to talk to him.
He was my friend, Rook.
I think this is a game that tries to give the player as much agency as we can, and then reflecting it back on you. Choice and consequence can be really hard to show, but this is a game about agency, about giving you options, and whether that be in how you play or approach combat, whether that be in how you make your character, whether that be in how you decide who you're going to romance.
So the challenge that's always before us is how do we appeal to each of those sensibilities? The person that's there for the story, the person that is there to min-max their character and do the most damage, the person who really wants to lean into tactical versus the player who really wants to lean into action and fluidity. There are a couple of different axes to our progression systems and how your character will develop over time. There is the gear that you'll find along the way, the things you'll equip. There are the progression systems there within where you're upgrading the gear, you're enchanting it. That extends to your companions, by the way. There is also the robust skill tree system. that we have. This allows you to take any of our 3 classes, the warrior, the rogue, or the mage, specialize them. Each class has 3 different highly distinct specializations, but a skill tree that connects them all together that is easy to use, but also pretty boundless in terms of the gameplay options and styles of character build you can create.
This demon quickly.
The gameplay in the franchise has been an evolution. Every single entry reimagines what combat is like.
But it does keep that thread that's always been there. When you go from Dragon Age Origins with very tactical combat to Dragon Age 2, which still had pause and play, to Dragon Age Inquisition, again with some tactics, pause and play, but moving towards more action-oriented aspects. In this game, you have focus on Rook, on your character, but still having that control coming into your combat experience from the other people in your party.
Our goal was to make sure we had a system that allowed players to feel like they actually were able to step into the world of Thedas. They're not a player observing from afar. They are inside of this world. The combat system needs to support that. So that starts with our foundation, which is a real-time combat system. But what I will say is that while it provides a level of accessibility and connection, and indeed weight, one of my favorite things is that every attack, every swing of the sword, when you connect, you absolutely feel it. But that is just the baseline. That allows us to get that level of immersion that I'm actually in this world, I'm a part of it. But again, the abilities, the strategy, linking my companions' abilities together to perform devastating combos, that is really where the depth and the complexity comes into play. Companions as realized characters. We have to take that premise when we talk about how they show up in combat. These are their own people. They have their own behaviors, they have their own autonomy on the battlefield. They'll pick their own targets. As their plots progress, they'll learn how to use their abilities more competently, and it really feels like you're fighting alongside these realized characters in battle. So I love that. I love the believability of it. It feels like we're all in it together. But then when it comes time for the strategy and the progression, I might add, that's where really a sense of teamwork comes into play. As the leader of this party as Rook, when I open the ability wheel, I almost feel like we're huddling up, coming up with a game plan together. I see all the abilities that Harding has, and I see everything that Balara is capable of. And sometimes I'm using their abilities synergistically. Maybe I'm slowing time with Balara so that I can unleash devastating attacks with Harding, knocking down the enemy, and then me as Rook, I'm rushing in and capitalizing on this setup they've created for me. It is a game about creating this organic sense of teamwork. Now, there are more explicit synergies as well. We very much have intentional combos where your companions can play off of each other. You can queue up abilities between them, and each of those abilities will go off and have their effect, but it results in this massive detonation where you get enhanced effects, debuff the entire battlefield, all because of planning and teamwork. What makes it really cool is you can introduce Rook into that equation as well. One of my favorite things to do is upgrade some of Harding's abilities. So she will autonomously use some of these abilities that normally I'd have to instruct her to do. And she'll actually set my character up to execute a combo that again has that detonation effect. And what's been surprising, I think, for me, is that it's really changed the way I approach the game. I'm very much the pause and play tactical, strategic RPG player. But what I found is that I entered into kind of a hybrid play style the more familiar I got with this game that we've created, where I'm leaning into the fluid, responsive gameplay. I'm using my abilities of Rook, our main character, in real time, but then I am pausing the action when I want to leverage my companions and string together complex combos or synergies that I've identified on my own. It gives you that moment to think and respond, in a way that is truly delightful. I came up through most of my career as a systems designer, working in progression systems and economy and how these little virtual characters behave. But I think the thing that surprised me the most has to be just the passion and the culture that the studio has for telling stories for these characters that we've all created together.
I mean, honestly, I just want to say I am incredibly proud of this project. I'm incredibly proud of this team, and I think the thing I'm most excited about when people start playing this game, people start seeing more about this game, is every little piece, every little thing in this game is because somebody cared. Somebody cared enough to put it in, and you can see that there's a saying that the game reflects the team. I think this one reflects the team that made it in the best possible way.
I'm really excited about this game. It's really been really gratifying to come back onto the team and see everything that they've accomplished in the last couple of years. The game's coming together great. It's really fun, and I'm really looking forward to people getting their hands on it in a little while.